All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Well, guys, last time I came to you with my prospect rankings for the Braves for prospects 9 through 16 in the system, guys that I'm getting particularly excited about, but who are most of those guys are a little further away from the big leagues, minus a couple. I talked about Drake Baldwin as a guy that might be pretty close. Of course, he's at AAA or made it all the way to AAA at the end of the year last year. We talked about David McCabe. We talked about some guys that were, pretty far away, including some of the more recent international signings as well. So in this episode, I'm going to break down the top 8 prospects in the Braves organization, at least how I see it. And that's how I did my last rankings as well. So keep in mind that my evaluation is a combination of high upside and projectability. I'm trying to really look at guys who some top prospect rankings will just look for guys who can make the big leagues, who could just, maybe be a bench player or have some kind of contribution to the team. Those guys are definitely getting a lower evaluation on my list. So I'm looking for starters. I'm looking for maybe even future all-stars. So my list is going to look a little different than many of the publications out there because I'm looking for those high impact players. From this list, there are only 2 players, maybe a third of everything fell right, that have a good chance to play for the big league club this season. So, as Braves fans, we are very fortunate to have a lot of stars playing in the big leagues right now. We just simply don't have a lot of needs. We don't have, you can think back 2015 to 2017, other than first base, there were a lot of holes that could have been filled with potential prospects, and we don't have that right now. Maybe one position, maybe a back end starter kind of thing. So there aren't as many holes, and that is a good thing. We can be a little patient with that. A lot of, I mentioned this last time. A lot of publications are putting the Braves pretty far down. I think ESPN just came out with the Braves being ranked number 26 out of 30 clubs, so very low. I still think that's probably a little lower than they should be, but nonetheless, it's true that the Braves' depth is not as great as it has been in the past. But of course, some of that depth was traded away to get a Sean Murphy or to get a Matt Olson or that sort of thing to round out the big league club, and the big league club is looking really good. So that being said, right, we want to dive into these top 8 guys, and I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about all of these guys. Last thing that I also mentioned last episode is the Braves have a great track record of development, and always, of course, they're bringing in talented players, but guys with a lot of high character, guys they know are going to work hard and going to commit to that development, and that combination has really brought about results in the recent past with guys like Michael Harris and Spencer Strider and some of the other young guys who have come up. So let me go ahead and dive into these top 8 players, and I'm going to start with number 8, Garrett Bauman. So Garrett Bauman is a massive human being, right-handed pitcher, 6'8", 245, and only 19 years old. The Braves drafted him in this most recent 2023 draft out of high school. Anytime you're drafting a high school pitcher, there's going to be a lot of volatility to those types of picks, a lot of risk. But man, Garrett Bauman is a huge guy. And as a young guy, you can imagine, you can really start dreaming on his physical tools. I mean, to be 6'8", 245 and a pitcher, that alone is kind of, remarkable and probably a little menacing if, he's up there and you're a hitter. He can already hit at times. He can hit 95 to 97 miles per hour. It's not super consistent. Sometimes he's more 93, 94. We've actually seen that even with AJ Smith-Shawver when he came up. Just a lot of, sometimes he's got an extra few miles per hour. I think a lot of that is just getting his pitching mechanics consistent. And a lot of people think with some mechanical adjustments, Bauman could get more consistent both with his velocity and with his command. His command is probably the bigger question. But as the Braves, I'm guarantee the Braves see that raw talent and the big body, and they think if we can get him into our development system and our pitching program, we can round him into form in a lot of good ways. So he does actually have decent command at times. Like I said, it just kind of comes and goes, but at times he has very good command, but the velocity will go down. So obviously you want 95 to 97 from a big dude like that, and he definitely has that ability. The Braves, I think the Braves really like Bauman. They aggressively allowed him to skip the Florida Coast League. A lot of first-time draftees, especially if they're coming out of high school, will go to the FCL first. Bauman actually went directly to Low A. Didn't make a lot of appearances, just a couple appearances, I believe. But they still let him do it at a very young age, and he held his own in a short stint. I have him ranked much higher than most publications do. Most have him in the 20s for the Braves, but it seems to me, right, that his physical tools plus the Braves' ability to develop um, a young pitcher like this is a really good combination for success, right? He has potentially a high 90s fastball. He has size, which you love. A lot of people want to project size as, a connection with a guy who can be a workhorse. And so, he has those tools. Now let's just get him into the Brave system and develop him and see what happens. And so that's why I have him higher. Yeah, maybe I'm dreaming on the guy a little bit. And when you see video of the guy, it's like, whoa, this dude is huge. What could he become? But it is pretty fun to think about Garrett Bauman a few years from now. Where could he be? All right, my number 7 guy is Luis Guanipa. So Luis is an outfielder, very young guy. He's the youngest guy on this top 8 list. He played as a 17-year-old with the Dominican League for the Braves last season. He came to the Braves through the international pool signing. $2.5 million the Braves paid him. So he was a big signing for the Braves just a couple years ago. Speedy outfielder with a high hit tool, and I like that combination right there, guys. Decent future power to come. Most believe, of course, as a 17-year-old, you're just kind of hoping you see that in a guy, but with good hit tools and decent size, which he has. It looks like a good thing. He also showed a good eye in his first season at the plate. Now, the Dominican League, I mean, you're only getting about 40 games, so it's not a ton of action. He hit 238 in that action, which is not great, but I mean, you never know what kind of luck he's having there. But even with a 238 average, he had a 361 on base percentage. So showing a good eye early on is a good sign. He's probably a left fielder or a center fielder in the future simply because he doesn't have a great arm. You would call him a four-tool prospect because he doesn't have the arm, but he pretty much has everything else. And he, like I said, he's grown into some good size. As a 17, 18-year-old, he's 5'11", 188. So it's likely that the power is going to come and really going to start showing a little bit more as he gets older. So obviously too early to tell too much on this guy, but a generally positive first season for this Venezuelan outfielder. He'll probably start in the Florida Coast League with the Braves this year. But if all goes well, he could make his debut at Low A later this season. And again, all I'll say with these really young guys that get signed out of the international pool is some guys, they sign. There's all this potential and their first season there obviously is one huge hole, like maybe they just can't make consistent contact or they just can't feel their position or whatever it is. Those red flags can really kill a prospect early on, and Guanipa didn't show any of those red flags. Generally positive stuff from him, so still pretty far away from the majors, but definitely a guy with a lot of potential, so we'll keep following him. All right, my number 6 guy is Sabine Ceballos, third baseman, first baseman, and I really like this guy. Ceballos is likely always going to hit. He's got good hit tool. He came out of the University of Oregon, out of the most recent draft, and he lets the ball travel. And any good hitter, I love these guys, Riley does this really well, especially when he's going well. Of course, Acuna definitely does it. Most of the Braves hitters do it. And I know that Kevin Seitzer, their hitting coach, loves hitters that let the ball travel. And Ceballos does that. He has real pop, and he has pop that where he can go the other way, leave the yard the other way. So I really like his bat. Um, his defense, his defensive position is in question. He's big and not overly athletic. The Braves have been playing him at third base. Some question whether he can stick there defensively. And of course, with Riley at third base long term, maybe the Braves would want to find a different position for him eventually. I think it's too early for them to start moving him around the diamond yet. But, if he starts hitting and he really becomes a true prospect in that sense, they might want to try to figure out a different position for him. So, maybe left field, maybe first base, but of course Olson's over at first base. So we're going to have to see about his position, but I really do like the bat. And the other thing I really like about Ceballos, and when the Braves drafted him, I did an episode and talked about him a little bit, and his college coaches just absolutely rave about his makeup. Basically, he's the best guy, um, between the years that they've ever had. And, so look, it doesn't guarantee anything. Nothing is guaranteed with prospects. But if you have a good head on your shoulders, a good attitude, and you are beloved by all your coaches, I think that is a huge thing that will go really well for Ceballos. So I think Ceballos is actually maybe the sleeper of the Braves system. He's still pretty far away. He's still, I believe, in A-ball. But Ceballos is a guy that I could imagine having a great offensive season this year, and then maybe one more season of figuring out his position, and we could be talking about Ceballos coming up to the Braves. It might be longer than that, but I really like the makeup of Ceballos. All right, my number 5 guy, and he's actually a little higher on most lists, but my number 5 guy for the Braves is Owen Murphy, right-handed pitcher. And he's not number 5 because I don't like him. I just happen to like a couple other guys that I slid up to higher spots. So, despite being a pitcher taken out of high school, Murphy seems to actually have a high floor. Most guys taken out of high school, like I mentioned with Bauman, it's so far, you're so far away. I mean, there's so much that could go wrong. Um, there's a lot of tweaks that you typically have to make to pitchers and their deliveries. They could get injured. Thankfully, so far with Murphy, none of that is the case. He has already actually experienced a lot of success through high A, even though most of last year he was 19 years old. So a lot of success early on is really positive. And I say he has a high floor for a couple reasons. He has a repeatable delivery. He has above average command, and he has 3 better than average pitches. So this all makes him, there's nothing certain, like I said, but it makes him a really solid prospect that you could see being at least a mid-rotation starter. Now, the question is, can he be more than that? And that's probably why I have him a little lower on my list. Questions still remain on that one. His fastball velocity sits in the low 90s, 91 to 93. It does play up a little bit. It's got good spin rates, and he also spins his curve and slider really well too. He has a lot of good command on all 3 of his pitches. So again, great command is good. I think if the fastball could tick up just 1 or 2 miles per hour, it probably turns him into a more dominant pitcher, and you're talking about a higher ceiling. So at only 20 years old, I think that could still happen for him. And look, being a number 3 starter at the major leagues, the Braves, if Owen Murphy did that for the next 10 years, once he comes up, the Braves would take that, and it would be massively important for the Braves organization. So maybe that's what Murphy is, sitting at 92, 93 miles per hour on his fastball, and just has a great slider and curveball, and is a consistent starter for them. But I think there could be more in the tank there, but we'll just have to see. All right, number 4 is Ignacio Alvarez, who goes by Nacho, which I just love. Makes me think of Nacho Libre, and not in the bad sense. I really like that movie, so we will definitely keep calling him Nacho, and I'm really pulling for him. He is a third baseman, shortstop, listed as a shortstop on the Braves sites. Drafted in 2022 out of California Junior College. Nacho Alvarez has done nothing but hits hit since being drafted by the Braves. He was actually a big surprise when the Braves drafted him in the 5th round. I remember watching the draft on MLB TV, and the Braves draft Nacho Alvarez, and the guys on MLB TV were like scrambling. They had nothing on the guy, right? He was an unknown. So the Braves did a tremendous amount, did a tremendous job in scouting Nacho out of this California junior college. So he has a solid glove at third base. The question with shortstop is not necessarily his glove, but his ability to cover enough ground to play shortstop. If he can, then his ceiling gets much higher. And I think that's the Braves will probably continue to play him a lot at short and see if he can develop that. Like I said, he has a great hit tool. He hits the ball to all fields. He has a great eye at the plate as well, very high on base percentage. He hasn't shown a ton of power yet. He's had a couple power surges on and off, but he's still only 20 years old. He was a young draftee out of this junior college. So if the power comes a little more and he can stick at shortstop, his ceiling gets much higher, right? His ability, I mean, if you're talking about Nacho Alvarez being a consistent kind of Edgar Renteria shortstop with 20 home run power and a great hit tool, I mean, that is a very good player for the Braves. So I think that's probably his ceiling if everything goes right. And if that happens, the Braves may have a low-key great find on their hands, and maybe an heir apparent to Arcia. You know, I'm always, you guys probably know this, I'm a little questionable about Arcia from year to year. I could see him kind of tanking at some point, and maybe not. Maybe he'll continue to do what he's doing, but he's not signed forever. I think the Braves have him for 3 more years. Alvarez, I think, could be ready. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. And so I think they'll probably just play it from there. And if he doesn't prove himself at shortstop, maybe he becomes just the Braves' backup infielder. I think they like him, and I think his hit tool is pretty meaningful and something that, yeah, he could be traded, I suppose, in some kind of deal. But I think the Braves are going to like Alvarez for a long time. He spent all year at High A Rome last year, so if he does well at Double A, I would expect him to be at Double A this year. Anytime you're at Double A, you're not very far from the majors. So I will definitely be keeping my eye on Nacho. All right, my number 3 is going to surprise some of you guys. It's definitely higher than I see most publications having. J.R. Ritchie is my number 3. So Ritchie is a pitcher that the Braves took out of Washington State as a high schooler. He has an upper 90s fastball with 3 other plus pitches in his arsenal, including a wipeout slider. The early results for Ritchie were incredibly impressive, even though he was just coming out of high school. He got injured very early on in his Braves career, required Tommy John surgery, probably why you haven't heard much from J.R. Ritchie lately. He only made 9 appearances, 9 starts before that happened. But again, he was really impressive before that injury. He'll likely be full go as of 2025. I don't know that he'll make many appearances this year, maybe just to get his feet back out from under him, but he's only 20 years old. So we can be patient, Braves fans. The reason I have him above Owen Murphy, Murphy was actually drafted just before J.R. Ritchie in the same draft, but I have Ritchie over Murphy because I think Ritchie has more number 1 potential stuff. I think he has a higher ceiling than Murphy, and I really like his makeup too. A lot has been said about his attitude and makeup, even during this injury that he's having to go through. So I'm betting on this kid, and I'm betting on his doctors to get him back on track. And yeah, I'm going to have to be patient to see him get back. His development might be a little more delayed than Murphy, and that's typically, I think, the main reason you're seeing most publications put him behind Murphy. But to me, Tommy John surgery, it's not a death sentence to pitchers' careers today. It's still serious, and not everybody comes back as good off of it. But I'm really hopeful that Ritchie will. Of course, a lot of pitchers have had Tommy John in their college careers and in their early minor league careers, including Strider and Fried. So I'm not too concerned about J.R. Ritchie. We just might have to wait a little longer for him. So maybe 2 to 3 years from now, we'll be talking about Ritchie knocking on the door to the big leagues. All right, my number 2 guy is someone we've already seen at the big league level, and that is A.J. Smith-Shawver. He's still only 21 years old and has only pitched for 4 years. A lot has been made of this. You probably heard this before, but Smith-Shawver didn't really start pitching until late in his high school days, and he's just starting to tap into his potential. It's really impressive that he's only pitched for 4 years and is already cracked the big leagues. And, the fact that he's risen so quickly in the Braves system in such little time as a pitcher shows you how talented he is. I mean, this guy might be kind of a savant kind of pitcher, and he's not perfect, and he still right now only has 2 major league pitches. It would be great for him to develop a third, but he's highly regarded as a hard worker, as a guy with a great attitude. I'm sure that's part of the reason why the Braves were willing to bring him up early, earlier than probably most would have expected last season. If you saw him pitch, you saw a mid-90s fastball, you saw a really good slider. There is talk that his slider was more impressive earlier in the season before he was brought up to the big league. So not sure what that was about. Maybe he got a little tired. But again, can he develop a third pitch? Does he need to, or could those first 2 pitches be dominant enough? Uh, his lack of pitching experience, it might mean that he takes a bit longer. The Braves are a little more patient with him in AAA this year. Is he needed to join the rotation, or can they keep him down for a full year of development? That might be what they would prefer. And there are other options for the Braves if they need to bring somebody else up. But he's certainly sitting there with some big league experience already. His floor to me seems like a back of the rotation guy or a dominant reliever, but I think his ceiling is probably a number 2 starter, and I think it's legitimate to project that. It might be a few years before he's really able to experience that level of success, but I think he's going to turn into a very good starter. All right, guys, and finally, my number 1 Braves prospect of 2024 is Hurston Waldrop. He was the number 1 draft pick out of the University of Florida for the Braves this past year. And look, he's most likely to be a number 1 starter across all of the Braves system. Waldrop has the stuff. He has dominant stuff. And he's probably the steal of last year's draft. The Braves were able to get him at the number 24 pick. He has the most dominant, pure stuff in the system with a mid-90s, really upper 90s fastball and a wipeout splitter. Some people call it a knuckle split, which I don't even know what that is. It's a very unique pitch. I know that a lot of publications have noted it as the best other pitch in the minor leagues, meaning not your typical like fastball, slider, curveball. And it really is a pitch that most people just don't see. And you don't have a lot of pitchers throwing split finger fastballs anymore. And his has a tremendous amount of downward dive to it. He has huge strikeout numbers. He had huge strikeout numbers through college and in last season, even though it was brief. This guy shot up the system all the way to AAA by the end of the year. He also got an invite to spring training this year, which tells me, it doesn't necessarily tell me that he could win a job. I mean, I suppose that's possible, but I think what that means is the Braves want him to get his feet wet around the big league club, and they want to see him, right? They want to, Snitker, I'm sure, wants to see him. Alex wants to see him a little bit more, get to know him a little better, and see if it might be possible to call him up at some point this year, especially if needed. We know the Braves have a 40-year-old in Charlie Morton. We know the Braves have Chris Sale, who's been injury prone. So we certainly hope that those guys stay healthy. But if not, having a Hurston Waldrop with the kind of stuff that he has down in AAA and an A.J. Smith-Shawver on top of that is really good for the Braves' depth. Again, for Smith-Shawver and Waldrop, I think the best possible thing that could happen was you give him a full year at AAA to develop. I really do, but sometimes that just isn't possible. And so we'll have to see there. Alex Anthopoulos did make comments saying that they really like Waldrop and that it's possible that he could make his debut in 2024. So I think that is real. Waldrop's biggest hurdle, the biggest negative to him, is his command. And you see this with some guys. He has such a huge arm that sometimes that ball can just kind of get away from him. He's such a high strikeout guy that I don't know that he needs to have pinpoint command and walk nobody. I think you could get away with walking 3 or 4 in a start if you're Waldrop because you strike out so many guys. But if he can prove his command just a little bit, then I think he's major league ready. And it's really exciting to know that the Braves have another guy that you could pair with a Spencer Strider that is just wipe out, strike out, dominant stuff kind of guy. And you start to see, and it's not, again, I mean, it might not happen this way, but you do start to see the future a little bit with Strider and with Waldrop and with Shawver, Smith-Shawver, and maybe a couple other guys. So, even though only 3 of these players are reasonably close to the majors in Waldrop, Smith-Shawver, and Alvarez, I really do like the Braves group as a whole. Other publications might have the Braves as a low tier farm system right now, but with having so many all-stars and so many great players at the big league level, only a few of these guys are going to need to contribute this year. And it's really, to me, about 2 or 3 years from now. And I think the Braves are in good position to tap in to the potential they do have in their system. I really think you got some good players coming up. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the State of the Braves and are excited as I am in the Braves' future and their prospects. And we'll be pulling for them. All right. Well, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.